Hi, this is Dad again. We're doing a little more work on the 57. There's been a little bit of a respite or a vacation in here. I went up to Michigan to spend a week with my grandkids so that their mom and dad could go on a cruise. And then I barreled back from Michigan and grabbed the camper, and off I went to Atlanta to be with my other son and daughter-in-law and my grandkitty. We went to the Atlanta race and had a great time. And now I'm back here in Omihoma, as my granddaughter calls it, trying to get the 57 ready to go on the power tour. So here's a little bit of what we've been doing since we last spoke. Here's a picture of our tailgate installed. Obviously, it didn't come from the same vehicle that the bed did, but who cares? This is a rescue. I've also got license plate mounted, ready for our first drive here in a couple of weeks. Got the rear bumper on, and I had to do some modification to the bracketry to hold the bumper on, which is probably understandable. And I checked it with another truck that was already completely built and did a pretty good job of getting my bumper in exactly the same spot that they're supposed to be. The 61 box came with this kind of a tail light. And I was going to be changing them anyhow because they're old. So when I was looking through the classic car parts catalog, they had the lights that are supposed to be on a 57 that were just like, as Derek from Vice Grip Garage says, these are just way more gooder. So those are the taillights that we're going to have on the 57. When we tried to put the bed on the frame with the Easy Chassis adapter kit, everything went well until I tried to put the steps on with the fenders. This part of the step, which lines up with the box, wouldn't clear where the adapter for the front of the bed went. So I had to cut this section out, move it out towards me 3/4 of an inch, and then weld everything all back up to where the step piece would fit where it's supposed to go. And by doing that, I had to rework the bracketry underneath the step to hold it in place. Also on the Easy Chassis kit, they only mount the bed on the front cross member and the rear cross member, which leaves 6 feet of bed unsupported. I didn't want to do that because it was just using the boards to hold the middle of the bed up. The original 57, or in our case, a 61, bed is mounted in 4 places. So what I did was make a bracket up out of a piece of pressure treated wood to make up the difference between the secondary cross member and the frame of the truck. In order to do that, I had to make up a special little nut. You can see the tail hanging right here. I just welded a nut to a piece of steel, slid it inside the hole, and that way I could come up from the bottom with a piece of threaded rod, thread it into the nut, and then tighten it up from the bottom. I did that on both of those back cross members. This is a relief that I cut out for my gas hose. I'm going to be using the original tank from the Yukon. but instead of the gas hose coming out through a door, I've decided that I want the gas hose to come out the back of the fender, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Getting back to mounting the bed, the center of the bed is still not supported, but it wasn't on the 57 either. These were the mounting points. It's the first cross member after the front and the first cross member in front of the back. So I made these brackets up to bolt to the cross member on the Yukon right behind the gas tank. Brought them up and mounted them to a piece that was on that cross member. So now I've got the 4-point suspension for the bed the way I wanted it. I also had to put a little saddlebag on this step as well to clear the adapter kit in order to make it work. Getting back to the gas tank arrangement, like I said, we're using the original gas tank off the Yukon. I had to be able to get the filler hose up to the back of the fender where I showed you the hole where that's going to be. So I ended up making a little connector out of a piece of exhaust pipe to go from the rubber hose that comes out of the tank to this piece, which was actually part of the filler hose system for the Yukon, and that has a bend in it which brings it out to where it comes out to the fender well itself. Now, interestingly enough, the piece that I made up for my gas cap, I wanted to use the original 57 gas cap because it just looked really cool. And I wanted to maintain the evap system on the car. So in order to do that, you have to have a system by which there's no vent in the gas cap. And this one obviously has a vent. They also had the gas tank right behind the seat, which I didn't want to do anything with that. That's for two reasons. One, with a vented gas cap, even though it's outside the cab and having gasoline in the cab, you're going to smell gasoline. And I've got a 70 Corvette that smells like gas all the time, and I didn't want this one to do that. So I went with a fuelless or a capless fill pipe off a 2014 to 2020 Corvette because it's really little, and it has the vent pipe and the fill pipe, but more importantly, it has a flopper valve down there that creates a non-vented situation so I can still use my evap. Now, this unit came with another flopper valve up on the top of it to keep air or keep moisture out of the real one. So I ground that off and ground out the inside of that to where I could take the end off the one that goes to the 57 and stick that inside the one that goes in the Corvette. Now this one was a little bit bigger than there was still slop in there, so I took another piece of exhaust pipe and cut it to make a buffer or a reducer, welded those together, and then put this end on that filler neck. Now, interestingly enough, the Corvette has a 1-inch pipe filler hose, and that creates a little bit of a problem here. There's a gap there. So I got busy and made this up. Again, the famous exhaust pipe. Made up a washer, just a piece of steel, cut a 1-inch hole in it, ground it down to where it fit here, and welded that on the end of the exhaust pipe, welded the 1-inch pipe into that to make an adapter to go in this pipe, come down to a 1-inch pipe, and that comes up and fits onto this. So my son says that I ordered them overnight from Mason Specialty Products, and that's kind of what we did. But that's the way that I went about trying to solve the gas tank filler situation. Some people put the fill pipe up in the front of the fender. Some people put it in the middle of the fender. I thought that I didn't want to mess with the sidelines of the truck, so I stuck it in the back. And it really looks cool when you get all this stuff hooked up. So that's the way I dealt with the gas system on the truck. Here we are up at the front of the truck. If you remember, or if you don't, I'll go through it anyhow. When I was doing the original work on the radiator support, I spent a lot of time on making this cross brace, which is supposed to stiffen up the whole front of the car. Made some special little brackets up to where I could bolt them in, and when I got my Vintage Air, one of the first things they tell you about when you're putting on the condenser is to cut all that off. So it's off. I have the condenser mounted, and of course the transmission cooler gets mounted back up in there. The power steering cooler gets mounted back up in here. And of course the radiator is mounted behind the condenser on the radiator support. Now, one of the things that I found, this is a Champion LS radiator for a 57 Chevy truck. Gorgeous piece of equipment. It's all aluminum. The welds on it are just spectacular. When I went to put it in, the 57 truck doesn't have an idler arm right here where the outlet for the radiator is. So I was either going to have to move the radiator outlet or do something different. And I chose to just bring the radiator up about 2 inches to where I could clear the radiator outlet and still have room for the fan to do its fan thing. By doing that, it does bring the radiator up above the radiator support, but there's still plenty of room up there for the hood, and that seemed like the simplest way to solve that problem. Other people went to great length to move the outlet, notch the other side for the steering box. I chose not to do that. Beautiful piece of machinery. They did a nice job with the welds on it. It's just an immaculate chunk of equipment. So I'm really, really happy with the radiator. It's supposed to be good for 600 horse. The 5.3 is only putting out like 230, 240, maybe 250. So we should be in good shape there with cooling capacity, especially with using the original engine-driven fan. If that doesn't work because we've got like 4 or 5 inches in between the fan and the radiator, I may try to shroud it if we need to. I'll either shroud it or put a digital fan on it, and we can do that. When I had the VATs taken out of the computer, the anti-theft device, to where we can start it with just a regular key. He said that he could put a computer-controlled fan controller by flipping some magic stuff inside the computer. I decided not to do it at this time because I still want to run the engine-driven fan. The LS engine has a steam port that comes out of the lifter valley, and this goes into the unit that they have already designed into it. And they send you the little 1/4-inch plug to 1/4-inch barb fitting for that, as well as the 1/4-inch plug to 3/8 barb for the two outlets on the oil cooler that's on the bottom tank. I do have 90-degree street L's that are going on there to let me take the hoses out the bottom rather than back towards the fan. So I'm still going to run the radiator transmission cooler as well as the auxiliary cooler in the front, just because it was on there before and it's real easy to plumb up. It comes out of the engine, the radiator cooler goes into the auxiliary cooler, and then that goes in the return line back to the 4L60E, to where that's a secondary cooler that uses the oil that's already cooled by the radiator. Now we come to radiator hoses. I was playing on some other websites with people that have done this, and they talked about a hose that worked for the lower radiator hose. Because as you can see, it's got a really serious bend in it, which the original one did too. But because and it works if the radiator's in the right position, if you were putting it into a 57 frame. But like I said, I've got my radiator moved up 2 inches, so it made this bend way too sharp, and it was kinking the hose. So what I did was to cut it here in the middle and put a connector in there to where I ended up swapping it around. When you get these hoses, you just look for the right bend and cut that part of it out. As you can see over here, there's quite a refuse pile of parts of hoses that I didn't use. Anyhow, this is the radiator hose that you need for an LS swap into a 57. It's a Gates 21710, and it's too long, and it's got some other stuff, and you just get your hacksaw out and make it do what you want it to do. The upper radiator hose, kind of interesting. That's just a piece of the original upper radiator hose. I just found the part that had the right bends, and kind of like a sculptor, you just cut out what doesn't look like what you want. This is actually backwards from what I originally had it, but it makes it better for the air induction. This is just a little cheapy $60 cold air induction kit for a Yukon. It's got, we come over here, it's got a big cone filter on it, and there's all kinds of plates and hoses and adapters to where you can still put the mass airflow sensor in here, and then the filter goes on top of that. So I'll just have to make up some brackets to go from here down to the inner fender, and from here up to the radiator support to make that a solid fit. One thing that I'm going to do, I have the original overflow tank from the Yukon that I've mounted over here on this right inner fender, but I'm going to change the operation of that a little bit because the radiator overflow isn't as tall as the top of the radiator, so the air's not going to stay in the overflow tank. This one is designed with a two-stage radiator cap on it, to where as the level comes up and fills this radiator up and it expands, fluid comes out of the overflow hose, goes to the overflow tank. As it cools down, there's another relief valve inside this radiator cap that it sucks the fluid out of the radiator, out of the overflow tank, puts it back in the radiator to keep the radiator full. So I'm going to be using this with that other radiator overflow just because I've already got that tank. But I'm going to be blocking off this line that comes up from the heater, both the hose and the outlet in the tank. And there's another outlet that goes to the top of the original radiator that we're not going to be using, so that will be blocked off as well. So I'm going to be using this overflow tank like they had, like on the 84 Chevys and stuff like that, just a bottle. But I've already got the tank and I've already got it mounted, so I changed my mind on how I was going to do that. But that's back out of the way, and I'm going to be able to use the windshield washer bottle that was on the Yukon, which in the Yukon it was over on the driver's side. I'm going to be able to put that right up here next to the radiator on the passenger side, and that actually has two electrically driven pumps in it, one for the front windshield wipers and one for the back windshield wipers on the Yukon. So I'm only going to be using one of those pumps, but I've got an installed spare because we do have windshield washers set up for the windshield wipers to where we'll be able to wash the windshields. And it also got electric windshield wiper kit to where it's not vacuum operated, and went with the deluxe kit to where you could have intermittent as well as just low and high, and it has a push button for the windshield washer. So that's that should keep that up with the normal things that you find on a modern day vehicle. So that's pretty much where we are with what's going on. Things are coming along very nicely. Like I said, I had some time off to go play with my grandkids and made them wooden shotguns and did a bunch of video games and stuff with my grandson. And my granddaughter got to do a bunch of sewing with her grandmother, so she was real happy about all that. Went to the race, and now we're back at it because we got to start buttoning this thing up to where we can take it on the power tour in June. Joffrey's going to be over here next weekend, and let me show you what he's going to be up to. I've been saving this for him. This is our donor chassis, the one that we took off the frame that now has the 57 on it. I made up some I-beams to put across the rails on my flatbed to where we could let it down on there and give us a chance to roll it around. When it was raining one day, I got wild hair and said, okay, what are we going to need out of the Yukon? So I took the steering column out of it. If anybody needs an airbag steering column, I've got one. The main thing I was after was all of this stuff. This is the major connector that comes out of the steering column, and that's got all the stuff that comes off the little celery stalk, the windshield washers, cruise control, all that nonsense. There's several fuse boxes. The two empty slots there are for the front doors. We've got this guy over here that's I think that's a 4-wheel drive. Yeah, that's the one for the. Anyhow, this is the one for the 4-wheel drive. Another big fuse block that comes in from the from here. This is where it goes out into the engine compartment, and this hooks onto the fuse box out there. And there's a couple of other connectors that hook onto stuff out in the fuse box with that front harness. So this is what I've been saving for my son. He's going to strip this apart, and this stuff we're going to hook up to the fuse box, figure out what actually has to come through the firewall, because I don't want to make that big a hole. And they did that because they had to be able to fit, all these big connectors through the firewall. And we're not going to do that. So there's probably only going to be 10 or 12 wires actually come back into the cab from that. But we've got all that stuff. And then obviously we've got a bunch of wires if we need to hook up something else. So that's where we're at. The idea when he comes over next week is that we want to get this thing to bark and make some noise and travel under its own power. So I'm going to finish getting the fenders on, get the new eyeballs put in. We bought all new stuff for the headlights. I bought some halogen headlights for it that are really, really cool. They talk about if you're going to use those, because they're modern day like would be in the Yukon. And they said if you're going to use those, that you really should have relays in to where you're not putting that amperage through the headlight switch. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this. This is the original fuse box. This is where that big white connector that's out in the trailer go. This connector is for the front harness. But this already has relays in for the headlights to where it's already done. So the wire that goes to the headlight switch just plays with the relays, and they do all the work out here, and that high current load doesn't go through them. So that's to be determined at a later date. These are the connectors for the computer with the little gaskets, and this is the computer that was with the Yukon. And like I said, we just took it up, had them unlock it to where it'll start with an old 57 key. This one didn't have a chip key in it, but it had to get some kind of a signal from the body control module to link it with the VIN number and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I just don't want to play with all that because I don't think we're going to be able to to match that. I don't want to keep the body control module in our system because it may say that it wants to do things that we don't want it to do. So there we are. The next installment will be from Joffrey running the system, and we'll be having some dialogue on what we got left to do and how we plan on doing that. So thanks for coming along for the ride. If you got any questions, just as Derek says, bebop down there in the bottom, and we'll try to get some answers back for you. When Joffrey gets here, we're going to go through the receipts that we've used, stuff that we bought for the truck, so you can get some kind of an idea on what it's going to cost to do this if you decide to take on a project like this. I thoroughly have enjoyed making the modifications to the truck and also making the connections to get things to work, and going to Mason Specialty Products to make the goodies that we need to get from where we are to where we want to go. So that's about it from Oh My Home at the moment. Talk to you soon. Thanks for staying with us.